She was a force of nature, a woman who didn't just break glass ceilings, she shattered them. Billed as the ninth wonder of the world, Chyna completely redefined what it meant to be a woman in the male-dominated spectacle of professional wrestling, becoming an icon of power and rebellion. She was the first woman to ever compete in the Royal Rumble, the first to qualify for the King of the Ring tournament, and the only woman in history to hold the prestigious Intercontinental Championship. But the very fame that turned her into a legend would also become the catalyst for a heartbreaking downfall, one fueled by betrayal, addiction, and crushing isolation. This is the story of how one of the brightest stars in wrestling history was tragically pushed into the shadows, and the lonely final days of the woman the world knew as Chyna. Her story is one of wrestling's most important and tragic. If you remember the power of Chyna, let us know your favorite memory of her in the comments, and be sure to hype the video and subscribe for more deep dives into the lives of wrestling's most iconic figures. A difficult beginning. Before the bright lights of the World Wrestling Federation, before she was the ninth wonder of the world, she was Joan Marie Laurer, born December 27, 1969, in Rochester, New York. Her childhood was anything but stable. Her parents split up when she was just 4, which led to a turbulent upbringing where she bounced between the homes of different family members. This constant upheaval made it almost impossible to form lasting friendships or ever feel like she belonged. From a young age, Joan was academically gifted and a talented musician. She even played the cello, an instrument she said she loved because it was big and unwieldy, just like her. But her home life was chaotic, filled with conflict and instability. In her autobiography, she recalled violent arguments and a deep sense of turmoil that never seemed to go away. It was this early pain that forged in her a fierce independence and a relentless drive to escape. She found her outlet not in music, but in the disciplined world of physical fitness. After graduating from the University of Tampa with a degree in Spanish literature in 1992, she joined the Peace Corps and taught English in Costa Rica. But when she returned to the States, she felt adrift, bouncing between odd jobs like waitressing and singing in a band, just searching for a purpose. And that purpose finally began to take shape in the gym. Bodybuilding became her sanctuary, a place where she could channel her frustrations and build not just muscle, but a suit of armor. She sculpted her body into an awe-inspiring physique, one that would become her trademark and her ticket into a world she never imagined. She started entering fitness contests, but it was a chance encounter with professional wrestling on TV that lit a new fire. While most people saw the women in wrestling as eye candy, Joan saw an opportunity. Wrestling. "I can do that," she remembered shouting at her television. It was a bold claim, but she was determined to make it happen. She packed her bags and headed to Malden, Massachusetts, to enroll in the legendary wrestling school of Walter "Killer" Kowalski, a man who had trained some of the industry's toughest stars, including her future partner, Triple H. Her training was grueling. Kowalski's school was old school. It demanded toughness and resilience. Her very first match in 1995 was against a man dressed as a woman. She wrestled on the independent circuit, under the name Joni Lee, honing her craft in small venues and local promotions, sometimes getting bookings through the pioneering female wrestler, the fabulous Moolah. She was unlike anyone else. Her look was imposing, her strength was undeniable, and her presence was magnetic. It was only a matter of time before the biggest promotion in the world took notice. In 1996, she met WWF performers Paul Levesque, better known as Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and Shawn Michaels. They saw tapes of her matches, and in her raw power, they saw the future. They saw the missing piece of a revolution they were about to start. The meteoric rise. The ninth wonder of the world. On February 16, 1997, the entire landscape of the World Wrestling Federation changed forever. During a match, a towering, stoic woman emerged from the crowd and choked out the valet, Marlena. The announcers were speechless. They had no idea who she was. This was the debut of Chyna. She was introduced as a bodyguard for Hunter Hearst Helmsley, a silent enforcer who let her actions do the talking. This wasn't a manager or a valet. This was muscle. She was an equalizer in a world run by men. Her impact was immediate. She became the cornerstone of a new, rebellious group that would define a whole generation of wrestling, D-Generation X. Formed in August 1997, the group, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Chyna, was the exact opposite of the cartoonish heroes of the past. They were rude, lewd, and unapologetically defiant. While Michaels and Triple H delivered the crass promos, Chyna was the quiet storm, the powerhouse who gave the group its edge. Triple H himself would later say that Chyna was the glue that held that together, the one who kept the often chaotic members in line. But Chyna was destined for more than just being a bodyguard. The fans saw it, and so did the company. Her physical prowess was just too great to be stuck at ringside. The question was no longer if she could compete, but who she could compete against. And the answer was anyone. In 1999, she shattered one of the industry's biggest gender barriers. On January 24th, she entered the Royal Rumble match, becoming the first woman in history to do so. Coming in at the coveted number 30 spot, she made an immediate impact, eliminating the powerhouse Mark Henry before being tossed out by Stone Cold Steve Austin. Her time in the match was brief, but the statement was monumental. She wasn't a novelty act. She was a legitimate competitor. Some male wrestlers were reportedly hesitant, with one backstage concern being, "I don't want a girl throwing me out." The response from management was simple. It wasn't a girl, it was Chyna. Get over it. Just a few months later, she did it again, becoming the first woman to ever qualify for the prestigious King of the Ring tournament. These weren't women's division accomplishments. These were milestones in the history of the entire company. She was even booked to become the #1 contender for the WWF Championship, the company's top prize, before the storyline was suddenly changed. The absolute peak of her in-ring revolution came on October 17, 1999, at No Mercy. In a good housekeeping match against the chauvinistic Jeff Jarrett, Chyna made history. The match was designed to be insulting, with things like brooms and mops as legal weapons, but it ended with Chyna smashing Jarrett's own guitar over his head for the win. In that moment, she became the first and only woman to ever win the WWE Intercontinental Championship, a title long considered the workhorse's belt, held by legends like Randy Savage and Bret Hart. This wasn't just a win, it was validation. It proved that a woman could not only compete with top male talent, but could beat them for one of their most coveted prizes. She would go on to win the title a second time, cementing her status as a true trailblazer. Her feuds with stars like Chris Jericho and Eddie Guerrero weren't just believable, they were compelling TV. Her on-screen romance with Eddie Guerrero, where he dubbed her his Mamacita, showed a different side of her personality, blending her intimidating power with a charm and humor that made her more popular than ever. By 2001, she'd done it all. She had competed in the Royal Rumble, the King of the Ring, and was a two-time Intercontinental Champion. The only thing left was to conquer the division that, ironically, she had long since transcended. At WrestleMania X7, she faced the women's champion, Ivory, and demolished her in less than 3 minutes. It was a coronation. Billed as the 9th wonder of the world, Chyna wasn't just a part of the Attitude Era, she was one of its most important stars. But just as she reached the absolute pinnacle of her career, a storm was brewing in her personal life that would bring it all crashing down. Chyna had reached the absolute peak, breaking barriers that no one thought possible. What was her most groundbreaking moment for you? Let us know in the comments. And if you appreciate stories about these legendary trailblazers, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this tragic story. The turning point, betrayal, and exit. At the height of her fame, the line between Joan Laurer and the character of Chyna was completely blurred. On screen, She was the powerhouse girlfriend of Triple H, a partnership that had launched both of their careers into the stratosphere. Off-screen, Joan and Paul Levesque, the man behind Triple H, were in a serious, long-term relationship and had been living together for years. They were a true power couple, central to the rebellious spirit of the Attitude Era. But in the world of pro wrestling, the lines between story and reality can be treacherous. Around the year 2000, a new on-screen narrative began to develop, a storyline marriage between Triple H and the boss's daughter, Stephanie McMahon. For the audience, it was just another dramatic twist. For Joan Laurer, it was the beginning of the end. The on-screen pairing of Triple H and Stephanie McMahon soon blossomed into a real-life romance. The exact timeline has always been a point of contention and pain. Chyna maintained for years that the affair began while she and Levesque were still together. She would later recount the devastating moment she discovered a love letter from Stephanie to Paul, confirming her worst fears. The professional and the personal had collided in the most brutal way imaginable. Suddenly, the woman who had clawed her way to the top of a man's world found herself in an impossible position. Her ex-boyfriend was now in a relationship with the daughter of the company's owner, a woman who was quickly becoming one of the most powerful figures in WWE. Chyna described the feeling as one of complete and utter isolation. She felt cast aside, both personally and professionally. In a family-owned business, what could she possibly do? The fallout was swift and severe. While Triple H and Stephanie's relationship became a central focus of WWE programming, Chyna's role began to shrink. The powerful enforcer who fought men was now mostly wrestling in a women's division she had already surpassed. The groundbreaking storylines that had defined her career seemed to dry up overnight. Her final match in the company took place at Judgment Day in May 2001, where she successfully defended her women's championship against Lita. Shortly after, the title was vacated and she was taken off television. By November 30th, 2001, she was officially gone from the company she had helped build. The official story was a contract dispute. With her contract up for renewal, Chyna felt she was a main event level star on par with names like Stone Cold and The Rock, and she asked for a contract that reflected that status. Jim Ross, then head of talent relations, confirmed she wanted a guaranteed salary of $1 million a year, a figure reserved for only a handful of the top male stars. WWE balked at the number, and negotiations fell apart. But for Chyna and many of her fans, the contract issue was just a cover for the more painful problem. She felt she was being pushed out. She later claimed that a meeting with Vince McMahon confirmed her fears. She alleged he told her that while she was welcome to stay, her creative opportunities would be limited, as the company needed to prioritize its new power couple. It was a professional death sentence, delivered right after a deep personal heartbreak. Being forced out of WWE wasn't just losing a job. For Chyna, it was losing her identity. She had poured everything into becoming this larger-than-life figure, only to have it all stripped away. The power, the fame, and the family she thought she had found in wrestling were gone. She was no longer Chyna, the ninth wonder of the world. She was Joan Laurer, alone, and facing a future filled with uncertainty and rage. It was a turning point from which she would never fully recover, the beginning of a long and tragic downward spiral. The downward spiral, the search for an identity. After the bitter split from WWE, Joan Laurer was cast out into a world that only knew her as Chyna. The problem was, WWE owned the Chyna trademark, which complicated her ability to use the name professionally. She was forced to adopt the name Chyna Doll, a subtle yet constant reminder of what she had lost. The woman who had been a symbol of power was now struggling just to reclaim her own identity. Her first move was to try and continue her wrestling career on her own terms. In 2002, she wrestled for New Japan Pro Wrestling, one of the most respected promotions in the world. Competing under her real name, she was treated as a major star and even had a high-profile match against Japanese legend Masahiro Chono. She later called that match one of the most physically demanding achievements of her life. For a moment, it seemed like she might reinvent herself. However, the run was short-lived. Reports from the time suggest her personal issues, including substance abuse and the chaotic presence of her then-partner Sean Waltman, made her unreliable, and her high-paying contract wasn't renewed. Adrift from wrestling, Chyna turned to the broader world of entertainment. She had already posed for Playboy magazine in 2000 while still in WWE, a decision that reportedly caused friction with Vince McMahon. He allegedly told her, "If you do Playboy, you don't get the belt," to which she replied, "F the belt, I'm doing Playboy." Now, outside of the WWE machine, she leaned into this image as a sex symbol, but mainstream acting roles were hard to come by. Instead, she found a home in the new world of celebrity reality TV. In 2005, she became a cast member on VH1's The Surreal Life. The show put a group of fading celebrities in a house together, and for Chyna, it became a raw and painful public spectacle. On camera, she drank heavily, got into explosive arguments with Sean Waltman, and appeared erratic and emotionally fragile. The experience didn't repair her public image. It just exposed her vulnerabilities for the world to see. This led to other appearances on shows like Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew in 2008. But even there, she openly resisted the label of addict, highlighting a deep-seated denial that would prevent her from getting the help she so desperately needed. It was during this period that she made her most controversial career move. In 2004, a sex tape she made with Sean Waltman was released commercially as One Night in Chyna. While the tape sold well, it came with an immense stigma. For many, this was the point of no return. The ninth wonder of the world, the woman who had competed for the WWF Championship, was now an adult film star. She would go on to make several more adult films over the years. That decision effectively blacklisted her from the mainstream wrestling world. While she always defended her choices as a way to control her own image and finances, it forever changed her legacy in the eyes of many fans, and, more importantly, in the eyes of WWE. It became the main reason cited for why she was kept out of the Hall of Fame for so many years. Her struggles became more public and more alarming. She had run-ins with the law, including an arrest for domestic assault. There were reports of her being found unconscious after a birthday party with cuts on her arms. In 2010, she was hospitalized after an overdose on sleeping pills. Her life, by her own admission, was spinning out of control. She felt abandoned by the industry she loved, and her efforts to find a new place in the world only seemed to deepen her isolation. Each headline, each reality show appearance, and each new controversy pulled her further and further away from the icon she once was. Final days and tragic end. In the years leading up to her death, Joan Laurer's life was a study in contradictions. She desperately sought peace, yet was constantly haunted by her past. In 2012, she moved to Japan, not to wrestle, but to teach English. It was a profound attempt to escape the shadow of Chyna, to find anonymity and purpose far away from the American spotlight. And for a while, it seemed to work. She appeared to be getting her life back on track, but moving to a different country couldn't solve her deep-seated issues. Her mental health struggles and addiction followed her. After a few years marked by reports of erratic behavior, she returned to the United States. Back in America, she seemed to be making one last concerted effort to reclaim her narrative. She agreed to be the subject of a documentary titled The Reconstruction of Chyna. The project was meant to chronicle her journey of recovery and her attempt to mend broken relationships, particularly with WWE. She reconnected with fans at conventions who greeted her with a love and admiration she hadn't felt in years. There was a flicker of hope that she could finally find peace with her legacy. But behind the scenes, the struggle was relentless. Her manager, Anthony Anzaldo, and the documentary filmmaker witnessed her battles firsthand. They described her as emotionally strained and constantly confronting demons. She was taking a mix of legally prescribed medications for anxiety and insomnia, but according to her manager, she wasn't using them properly. Her behavior grew increasingly erratic. In her final days, she retreated into her apartment in Redondo Beach, California. Her social media, once a way for her to connect with fans, went silent. One of her last YouTube videos is a heartbreaking glimpse into her state of mind, showing her rambling and incoherent. Yet her final Instagram post was a smiling selfie with a message of peace and love. She wrote, "Happy Sunday, my lovelies. I hope you all enjoy your day with your family. Be happy, love each other, and live in peace." That post was on April 17th, 2016. 3 days later, on April 20th, her manager, unable to reach her, entered her apartment to check on her. He found her in her bed, unresponsive. The autopsy would later determine that she had likely been deceased since April 17th. Joan Marie Laure, the woman the world knew as Chyna, was dead at the age of 46. Police found no signs of foul play. The coroner's report confirmed what many had feared, ruling her death an accident caused by the combined effect of alcohol and a lethal mix of prescription drugs, painkillers, anxiety meds, and sleeping aids. Her mother told investigators that her daughter was an alcoholic who was addicted to her prescriptions. The ninth wonder of the world had died alone, a victim of the same demons she had fought for so long. Legacy and posthumous recognition. In the aftermath of Chyna's death, there was an immediate outpouring of grief from the wrestling world. For years, she had been a controversial, almost forgotten figure. But faced with the tragic finality of her story, the industry was forced to confront her true impact. Wrestlers from every generation, from Mick Foley to the women she inspired like Beth Phoenix, spoke of her as a true pioneer. The consensus was clear. No matter what path her life took, Chyna's contribution to wrestling was undeniable and revolutionary. She had fundamentally changed the role of women in WWE. Before her, female performers were mostly valets or wrestlers in a separate, less respected division. Chyna kicked that door down. By competing against and defeating top male stars, she proved a woman could be a credible, dominant force in the main event. You can see her legacy today in powerful, athletic wrestlers like Rhea Ripley and Bianca Belair, who embody the Amazonian ideal that Chyna first brought to a global audience. As Triple H himself would later say, she was a paradigm shift in how people saw women of power. The biggest question surrounding her legacy had always been her exclusion from the WWE Hall of Fame. For years, the company kept its distance, with her adult film career often cited as the reason why. But her death made this exclusion feel petty and cruel. Fans and wrestlers alike began a public campaign for her induction. Finally, in 2019, a few years after her passing, WWE made the announcement. Chyna would be inducted into the Hall of Fame, not as a solo performer, but as a member of D-Generation X. While many felt a solo induction was what she truly deserved, it was at least a moment of reconciliation. At the ceremony, her former stablemates paid tribute, acknowledging her as the vital component that made DX work. The crowd roared with chants of, "Thank you, Chyna," a powerful posthumous recognition of her impact. Her induction opened the door for her to be recognized in other ways. She was put back in WWE video games, reintroducing her to a new generation of fans. More importantly, it allowed the company to officially celebrate her as the trailblazer she was, leaving what WWE.com called a lasting legacy as the most dominant female competitor of all time. Joan Laureur's journey was one of extreme highs and devastating lows. She rose from a troubled childhood to become Chyna, a global icon of strength. She broke barriers many thought were unbreakable, earning her place not just among the greatest female wrestlers, but but among the most impactful figures of her era. But the fame she acquired came at a profound personal cost. The same industry that built her up ultimately cast her out, leaving her to grapple with heartbreak, addiction, and a search for identity that ended in tragedy. Her story is a stark reminder that behind every larger-than-life persona is a human being, with all their vulnerabilities and pain. Chyna deserved better. She deserved to see the generation of powerful women she inspired headline WrestleMania. She deserved to hear the roar of the crowd as she took her rightful place by herself in the Hall of Fame, and she deserved to find peace. While her life was cut far too short, her legacy is one of power and inspiration. She was, and always will be, the one and only ninth wonder of the world.